I remember last time we were in the middle again. I distracted the discussion a little bit, so let's digress. I like that word these days. Learn from your dad. So it's gonna be the second paragraph. I don't know where it is on your book, but it might what follows in regard to our duty from that revelation. Can you find it?
Yeah, hold on, my Kindle's being a little slow.
It's okay. Now let me read on, okay, so that you can hear then follow up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What follows in regard to our duty from that revelation? Walk before me, and be thou perfect in a walk with God, that is, his whole active life was pressed in communion with him. The idea conveyed by walking before God is not precisely the same. It's rather that an active life spent in continual consciousness of being naked and open before the eyes of him to whom we have to give account. That the thrilling consciousness will not paralyze or terrify, nor terrify, if we feel that we are not only ever in the great taskmaster's eye, but that God's omniscience is all knowing love. It is brought closer to our hearts and close in gracious tenderness in Christ, whose eyes were a flame of fire, that whose love, but whose love is more ardent still, who knows us altogether and pities and loves as perfectly as he knows. So, in a sense, his kindness, love, and perfect propitiation offer the chance to gain not a sin consciousness, am I right? Deliver from a sin consciousness into a love or sun consciousness. Making sense to you?
Right.
So yeah. What sort of life will just you feel free to comment as well, okay? So yeah,
Of course, yeah.
you have thoughts. What sort of life will spring from the double realization God's almightiness and our being ever before him? Be thou perfect, nothing short of immaculate conformity with his will can satisfy his gaze. His desire for us should be our aim, desire for ourselves. The standard for aspiration and effort cannot be lowered to meet weakness. This is the nobility of life, to aim at the untenable and be ever approximating towards our aim. It's more blessed to be smitten with a longing to win the unwon than to stagnate in ignoble contentment with partial attainments. Better to climb with the faces turned upwards to the inaccessible peak than to lie in the ease in the fat valleys. It is the sort of life to have our aims set fixedly towards ideal perfection, and to say, I count not myself to have apprehended, but I press towards the mark. Towards that mark is better than to any lower. Our moral perfection is, as it were, the reflection in humanity of the divine almightiness. Can you believe that? This is from a Baptist scholar, am I right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
The wide landscape may be mirrored in an inch of glass, even it may be, in some manner, presented in miniature in final natures. Our power cannot represent God's omnipotence, but our moral profession may especially sense that omnipotence is pledged to make us perfect if we will walk before Him. 2. Note the sign of the renewed covenant. Compliance with these injunctions is clearly laid out as the human condition of the divine fulfillment of it. Be thou perfect comes first. My covenant with thee follows. There was a contingency recognized from the beginning. If Israel broke the covenant, God was not unfaithful if he should not adhere to it. But the present point is that a new confirmation is given before the terms are repeated. The main purpose, then, of this revelation did not lie in that reputation, but in the seal given to Abraham by the change of name. Another sign was also given which had a wider reference. The change of name was God's seal to his part. Circumcision was the seal of the other party, by which Abraham's family and afterwards the nation took on themselves the obligations of the compact. The name Bethuel is taken to mean father of a multitude. It was condensation into a word of the divine promise. With the trial of Abraham's faith, it was to bid him take a name which would sound in man's ears like irony than promise. He closed on 100 years old, but with but one child, was known not to be the heir, to be called the father of many. How often Canaanites and his own household would smile as he used it. That's interesting observation there, huh? Yeah. What a peaceful senile presumption it would seem to them. How often Abraham himself would be tempted to think his new name a farce rather than a sign. But he took it humbly from God that he wore it, whether it brought ridicule from others or assurance in his own heart. It takes some courage for any of us to call ourselves by names which rest on God's promise, and seem to have little indication in present facts. The world is fond of laughing at the sins, but the Christians should familiarize themselves with the lofty designations which God gives his children, and see in them not only a summons to life corresponding, but a pledge and prophecy of the final procession of all which this imply. God called things that are not, and though they were. It is wisdom, faith, and humility, not presumption, which accepts the names as omens of what shall one day be. The substance of the covenant is mainly identical with the previous revelations. The land is to belong to Abraham's seed. That seed is to be very numerous, but there is a new emphasis placed on God's relation to Abraham's descendants. God promises to be a God to thee, and to thine seed after thee. And again, I will be their God. Be their God, verse 7 and 8. That article of the Old Covenant is repeated in the New, Jeremiah 31:33, with the addition, and thee shall be my people, which is really war in it. We don't read later more spiritual ideas into the words when we find in them here, and the very beginning of Hebrew monotheism, an insight into the deep truth of the reciprocal, reciprocal, reciprocal possession of God by us and of us by God. What a glimpse into the depths that the one heart is given when we see that we are his possession, precious to him, above all the riches of earth and the magnificences of heaven. What a lesson to the inmost blessedness of religion when we learn that it takes God for its very own, and it is rich in possessing Him, whatever else may be owned or lacking. To possess God is only possible on condition for yielding ourselves to Him. When we give ourselves up in heart, mind, and will to be His, He is ours. When we cease to be our own, we get God for ours. The self-centered man is poor. He neither owns himself nor anything besides, in any deep sense. When we lose ourselves in God, we find ourselves being content to have nothing, and not even to be our own masters or owners. We possess ourselves more truly than ever, and have God for our portion, and in Him all things are ours. I'm going to read on a little bit, okay? So,
Okay.
a petulant wish. What that word means? A petulant.
It means like bad tempered or like childish.
Oh, perverse. Okay, bad tempered. Yeah, Child is a Suli. Yeah. You know a lot of words I don't know, man. So
I
petulant.
looked it up before.
Oh, you did? Okay. Good. Petulant. And Abraham said unto God that Ishmael might live before thee. Genesis. What's number that? That is 17?
Yeah.
17, 18. Those words sounds very devout, and we have often been used by Christian parents yearning for the best interests of their children, and sometimes for their wayward and prodigal children. But consecrated as they are by that usage, I'm afraid that their meaning and they were honored was nothing so devout and good and that which is often attached to them. Interesting, that your child, I mean, basically someone might leave before they. Here's a here's a complaint actually, right? So so yeah. One, note the temper in which Abraham speaks here. The very existence of Ishmael was a memorial for Abraham's failure in faith and patience. We saw that the promised heir was long in coming, and so he saw that he would help God. For 13 years, the child has been living beside him, widening a son's way into a father's heart, with much in his character, as was afterwards seen that would make a frank, daring boy his old father's darling. Then all at once comes the divine message. This is not the son of the covenant. This is not the heir of the promise. Sarah shall have a child, and from him shall come the blessing that has been foretold. What does Abraham do? Fall down in thankfulness before God, leap up in heart the conviction that now in the last, the long looked for fulfillment of the oath of God was impending. Not he. Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. Why can he do? Why may he not be the chosen child, the heir of the promise? Take him, O Lord. Now here they ask God the real essence out of him, right? So yeah. Abraham don't want Ishmael to be dismissed from the promise, basically, right? So
Right.
that is to see he thinks that he knows better than God. uh, yeah, that's cut here, right? I'm sorry. He is petulant. He's childish. He's what is the word? Peevish, peevish, bad-tempered, silly, all kind of things of his own un- undisciplined will, basically, right? His own wants, basically.
Yeah.
That's a human love.
Mm.
He's a petulant. He resists is a blessing. He fancies that the same kind of love in different setting, different expression, but it's a self-oriented love. In this one, it's a father's natural love towards a son, right? So Abraham towards
Yeah, it reminds me
Ishmael.
of what Oswald was talking about a few days
He did? Okay, tell me.
where yeah, I think you quote off of where sympathy for others can actually get in the way of things that the Lord seeks to do, even in that life or in your life.
Yeah, very much so. John learned that lesson very well when we first met, so he got burned real quick. So
Yeah.
his life was ruined by those people. So,
Mm.
in a certain light, So, but I think about in the Bible, different setting relationship, but the same kind of dynamic almost. When Peter told Jesus, "Lord, you can't go," basically, right? Rebuked him. You remember that? So so
Mm.
that's a friendly love. So.
Yeah.
But a humanistic love, making sense to you? So not yielded, disciplined, and enlightened, then be educated, bring a place in alignment with the Father's will. excuse me, making sense to you, or the desire of God making sense to you, So yeah,
Right.
let's move on. He did not want to draw away his heart from the child that was twined around, so he lost the blessings of revelation that is being made to him because he lost the vision, basically, right? In a sense.
Right.
Because he does not best do his will, accept God's way instead of his own. Huh. Look, King Saul, the same thing almost there it was, right? So yeah, and the
Yeah.
whole history for Israel in the Old Testament, in particular, the same thing, right? So the Pharisees in the Jesus day had the audacity to rebuke him, said, "You are blaspheming God." What's really going on? Is they want their own way to be exalted above God's living will. Making sense to you? So yeah. Anyway, now, do you not think that is now? Do you not think that is what we do when God sends us Isaac? Do we not often say, "Take Ishmael, he is my own making. I have set all my hopes on him. Why should I have to wretch them all away?" In our individual lives, we want to prescribe to God far too often, not only the ends, but the way in which we shall get to the ends. And God is sometimes all about the way, right? So, yeah, sometimes, okay. So he always control the end in a sense.
Yeah.
So his dynamic with us is all about the way, right? So make it sense to you. So he knows the end. He assures the end, but he does want the fellowship and discipleship, if you will, to teach us in between, right? That is the way. So, and we think to ourselves, that route of my own engineering have a God all stuck it out. That is the true way for God's providence to take. I just learned this morning some word study, right? So called the hearing, right? Not seeing. First John said that which we heard, right? The heard is a word literally means a disciple, and the student that's the teacher, am I? So yeah, parroting the same root for that word. You know how a root, Greek how a root, making sense to you? So is the word actually follow. Follow the same path as a disciple will follow the old teachers. So then the thing about Jesus is that my sheep hears what? My voice. They follow. Am I making sense to you? What a perfect picture. Think about it. So, but oftentimes, especially in today Christian relationships, what do? We think that is oftentimes construed as controlling. Am I? So interfering as like making sense to you. So can you believe that? So anyway, and we some of us continue to encourage called independent thinking. We have to make our own choices. With the key of God, walk with God, you let go your own choices. Making sense to you? So
Right.
I was talking. So we don't think like that. We think, oh, I go to a restaurant, I'm gonna eat a meal, because I pay for it, because I choose a restaurant. Therefore, the meal was my making. You see my point? So we never think, well, you know what? That's so not so true, right? Yes, we pay for it. Yes, we choose it. But that part ended when the cook began to step out to cook your meal. Making sense to you? He is in control. So you can't really say, "Hey, I got to taste my food, all in my control." Making sense here, So, but man's pride is interesting pride. I bought my meal as if I own the taste, and the real content and skills applied to making a meal. Making sense here, So the truth of the matter uses a placeholder for something to be filled in, vessel fill in something. Oftentimes, man is so, the word actually is a pride, a conceited, because he think he able to do something and therefore, um, he controls the end result. Making sense to you? So rather perceiving his relationship is a humble invitation to what God wants to do. Making sense to you? So you have to think about the best chef in the world. If he really don't like you or he in bad mode, he's just he's not cooking very well. Making sense to you? So or maybe the mediocre chef, and but he said, that's my honorable guests. I really want to do my best. Am I? He did outstanding with that meal. Making sense to you? So then you if you're gonna use namesake, said, hey, it's the best chef's meal. I paid all the money, and you can walk away. Even the meal is not good, but pride will forbid you. You said, you know what? That's not a good meal, am I right?
Yeah.
And also the same pride will stop you to praise the common chef, or and give him high credit. Am I right? You made the best meal I ever eat. So outstanding. So making sense to you. So in that regard, no, I in the pray because learn things from a text or reading is oftentimes useless. So but learn the real deal is everything. In this case, as I think in former session discussed with you, to do a serious case study in the way how God chose Abraham to be example of father of faith in severe dealings like this, life-changing dealings. Ishmael, Isaiah was not merely a good story, right? It's speaking about our inner man, as a matter of faith, going to go through more than like Abraham going to have to make some choices. But even to examine our way, are we a Ishmael or are we a son? Making sense to you? So are we like Ishmael, merely a placeholder for a while for God's promise, but actually has no real ability to inherit it? It answers my point, So, um, well, Christians through the ages, as we witnessed, obviously don't lie to ourselves. It's a prevalent today. It's full of Ishmaels. Making sense to you? So yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Lord, I do pray for, um, Lord, our discernment as it concerns even this ancient sin, Father, of Lord producing that which is according to our own ideas, Lord, even of who you are, Lord, and of what your purpose is for our lives, Lord, what your destiny is for our lives, Lord, truly your purpose, and you yourself, Father, are unchanging, Lord, certainly not influenced by the whims of and the fancies of man and his ideas. And Lord, I do pray that in life we would carry such a wisdom that enables us, Lord, to catch, um, Lord, those ideas that would produce, Lord, that stubborn way of thinking within us, Lord, before they truly take root and bear fruit, Lord, even as happened in the example of Abraham's life,
Mm,
Lord, in his desire, Lord, as through the lens, in a sense, of his carnal mind and his flesh,
mm,
Lord, his desire to fulfill your purpose in that way.
mm,
Lord, it is indeed, Lord, not simply the end, Lord, but the the way in which we achieve that end, Lord, that matters to you, Father.
mm,
Lord, if it did not, then Ishmael himself would have been acceptable.
mm,
Lord, but it is indeed the way in which we do things, Lord, that you, as was mentioned earlier, Lord, desire to fellowship with us, Lord, to teach us,
mm,
Lord, to reveal yourself to us,
mm,
and even to make us perfect before you, Father, as we desire ourselves to achieve that goal,
mm,
or knowing that it is not to be attained according to our own strength or according to any framework or of wisdom that this world has to offer,
Mm.
Lord, but can only be done through the strength of He who is already perfect
Mm.
and is always perfect. Lord, that is you, Lord,
Mm.
in your ways. So, Lord, truly these things are simple in the sense that they are not uh, too complex to understand, Father, Lord, and furthermore to practice in life.
Mm.
So, Lord, I pray that we would not um, fall short by seeking to overcomplicate things in
Hey.
that sense, Lord.
Yeah.
And Lord, I do pray that you would bless us in our own lives.
Yeah.
And I pray this in Jesus' name.
Thank you,
Amen.
Noah. We still have a few minutes left. I can think I'm gonna finish the second point. Okay, so here.
Okay.
Back to this point, because then ruled from our own engineering that I have got all staked out. That is the true way for God's providence to take. And when His path does not coincide with ours, then we are discontented, and instead of submitting, we go with our petty scheme to Him. If not in so many words, at least in spirit and temper, we try to force our way upon God. And when He is speaking about Isaac, insists on pressing Ishmael on his notice. Excuse me. It is often so in regard to our individual lives. This sin, this stubbornness, this misrepresentation, if you will, or unproved uh, uh, unsealed, if you will, sacrifice, right? So, as drive many Christians, almost like forfeited God's divine work or calling in their lives. So it's a Suzanne to see it happening in very devout, spiritual, and even wise people. But they can't forego, on this point, allow their life what I call a bird of prey. So God will do everything He needs to do. And sometimes God do is He take the best of your life and said, "Would you like for me to have a see over it?" And use basically like a sacrifice Isaac, right, leading up to it. Anyway, not let me finish the reading, rather elaborate on that point. There's a lot of things to ponder on this story, making it into deep, profound truths. Unless we know that, we really don't know Abraham's why he is considered as a father of faith or the man of righteousness in God's sight. Why God considered he is a capable and valid partner for his covenant to be mapped out again for all humanity, right? So it's often so in regard to our individual lives. It is so in regard to one united action of Christian people very often. A great deal of what we call self-earnest contending for the faith was delivered to the saints. What a beautiful observation. Is nothing more or less than insisting that the methods man's devising shall be continued, when God seemed to be substituting for them methods of His own sending. So fighting about externals and church polity, and determining that the world has got to be seen in my own special fashion, and in no other, though God Himself seemed to be suggesting the new thing to me. That is a very frequent phenomenon in the experience of Christian communities and churches. Ishmael is so very dear. He is not the child of promise, but he is a child that we have thought it is advisable to help God with. It's hard for us to part with him. Dear brethren, sometimes too, God comes to us in various providences and not only reduces into chaos and a heap of confusion, our nicely built up little horses. But it sometimes comes to us and lifts us out to some lower kind of good, which is perfectly satisfactory to us, but all but perfectly satisfactory in order to give to us something nobler and higher. The 12 tribes, right, crosses the Jordan, remind us of the story. And we resist them too, and do not see why Ishmael should not serve God's turn as he has served ours, or think that there is no need at all for Isaac to come into our lives. God never takes away from us a lower, unless for the purpose to bestow upon us a higher blessing. Therefore, not to submit is the foolishest thing that man can do. And many are proved to be true in the Bible and in our real life, right? So, but if that be anything like a account of the temper expressed by this saying, it is not strange that murmuring against God takes the shape of praying. There is a great deal of prayer as a call itself, which is just molded upon this petulant word of Abraham's momentary feeling faith and submission. How many people think that to pray means to bring their wish to God, to try to cause Him to make them His wishes? Why half the shallow, skeptic talk of this generation about the worthlessness of prayer goes upon that fundamental fallacy that the notion of prayer is to dictate turn to God, that unless a man gets his wishes answered, he has no right to suppose that his prayers are answered. But it's not so. Prayer is not after the type of all that Ishmael might leave before thee. That is a poor kind of prayer, of which the inmost spirit resistance to a clear dictate of the divine will. What the true prayer is, oh, that I may be willing to take what thou art willing, in thy mercy and love to send. I believe in impotent prayer, but I believe also that a great deal of what called self-impotent prayer is nothing more than an obstinate determination not to be satisfied with what satisfies God. If a man has been bringing his wishes and can but have such continuously to God with regard to any outward things, and these have not been answered, he needs to look very carefully into his own temper and heart in order to make sure that what seems to be waiting upon God in importunate petition is not pestering him with refused desires. To make a prayer out of my rebellion against his will is surely the greatest abuse of prayer that can be conceived. And when Abraham said, all that Ishmael might leave before thee, if he said it in the spirit, in which I think he did, he was not praying, but it was a grumbling. And that's interesting, huh? Good insight. We'll continue next time.